Well, it took us a bit, but we are here. So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our Come Back Stronger Fund webinar today on staffing and learning loss. I am very glad you guys could join me, and I really hope that your day is going a little bit easier than our technology was in the past 10 minutes. So a couple of notes to everybody who's attending with us today. We are going to keep everybody muted in order to keep quality background off of our sound so we're able to understand what's going on. But if you do have a question any point throughout the webinar, please go ahead and type that into our questions box, and that'll come through to our team, and we'll be able to address those at the end of the session today. We will also have this webinar along with additional resources we may talk about today available within 24 hours of our broadcast at the Come Back Stronger Fund webpage, which, as you can see right there, is earlylearningindiana.org, Come Back Stronger. All right, let's get started then. We are here today to talk a little bit more about our Come Back Stronger Fund, specifically as it relates to staffing and learning loss. So for those of you who were able to join us previously for our webinar explaining opening of round 2 of the Come Back Stronger Fund, we're really going to focus in on those support types today, give you some more ideas, and take some questions around what your program could be doing to support your children and your families right now as it relates to being aware of and ready for the next steps. So we'll be going through a couple of things. I want to give a quick update on the Come Back Stronger Fund as it stands right now. I do want to give a little bit more information about the support types, and then we're going to get into the bulk of our time together today, our highlight on staffing and learning loss. And I'm going to invite a couple of local experts on to help us discuss what this might mean for their programs and your programs, and to be able to give you guys some ideas that you could take back and apply using your Come Back Stronger Fund grants to support the actions you might take. We're going to round it out today with some opportunities for support for programs that are considering applying or have already applied and received a Come Back Stronger Fund award. And then we'll hit on the important next steps and dates, and then take all questions that we are able to take from our audience participation. So for those of you who I haven't met individually yet, I am Natalie Brake, and I get to work with our Early Learning Indiana team, really just doing a lot of our outreach to providers and understanding what's going on within our communities and the barriers that families, children, and providers face to ensuring access to high quality care. I do that as my role within Early Learning Indiana because we are focused as an organization, and we believe that we can educate and activate a network of stakeholders to create accessible, high quality early learning education environments for all the children in our state. We do this in 3 important ways: by practicing what we teach at our day early learning centers across the greater Indianapolis area, where we are responsible for the care of children every single day. We do this by sharing what we know as an expert partner that enables early learning partners and providers to build their own capacity, to transform their operations, and to improve learning outcomes for the children in their care. And we also strive to drive system level change so that we're able to influence all the factors that create barriers for high quality care in your local communities and ours. It's really speaking to all 3 of these goals that Early Learning Indiana has that went into the creation and the establishment of the Come Back Stronger Fund. The Come Back Stronger Fund was initially launched last summer with the support of the Lilly Endowment Inc. And Early Learning Indiana presented it in order to award $25 million in grants with the purpose of reinforcing Indiana's supply of high quality early learning opportunities, and very crucially, to support providers across the state who are committed to serving vulnerable family populations. We know that early learning providers, even in the best of times, are operating with razor thin margins when it comes to supporting and establishing their program in ways that keep their operations flowing and keep them feasible within their community. Add on top of that a pandemic that brought unprecedented challenges when it came to safety, when it came to supporting families, when it came to supporting children, and to that side of it too, dropping enrollment as families chose to stay at home or make alternative care arrangements. All of these factors combined created a situation in which the early learning provider network across Indiana needed support to ensure that they were providing the everyday care that our Hoosier children and families need and deserve. Early Learning Indiana has been very proud to present this fund, and we're excited this week to be announcing and to be sharing out for those providers who do qualify for a second round of funding, who have already submitted their application and been through the approval. You'll be getting notifications later this week, and we're going to continue to ensure that those funds and those grants go out the door and into the hands of the early learning providers who need them. If you are a previous grant recipient from the Come Back Stronger Fund, it's important to note what you are eligible for this round of funding. This does include funding based off of your enrollment and the percentage of students served who are on CCDF or On My Way pre-K vouchers. So if you are a program that serves less than 20 students, you would be eligible to receive $1,800. If your enrollment includes 25% or more of students who are served by those On My Way pre-K, CCDF vouchers, you would be eligible for an additional $900, and so forth across the screen for each of those amounts. We do want providers to understand that you may be asked to show proof of your enrollment, and if so, we would be reaching out for you to verify that. For those providers who have not yet received a Come Back Stronger Fund award, we will be opening an application process for potential new grantees starting on February 15th for these same funded amounts. One of the questions that we're already getting a lot on our office hours and other opportunities for support is, how might we use the funds this round differently than we did last round? And we've continued to share with providers ideas around the types of support that they may use Come Back Stronger funds to support. So these can be things in different categories around purchasing the supplies and equipment, increasing those staffing needs, modifying the physical environments, professional services, expanding enrollment, and the new category of designing and implementing activities to combat learning loss. What we've realized in our applications that we've already received is that many providers in the state have already modified physical environments and purchased some of the equipment, although new equipment and new pieces are always needed. They've already obtained some of the professional services that they need, and if they were considering expanding, many programs have. What we're seeing initially in these applications for round two coming in are many thoughts and many questions around both staffing and learning loss, which is why we decided to focus there today. So when we look at staffing, allowable funds for staffing when it comes to the Come Back Stronger Fund include things such as paying for staffing to cover substitutes or temp services, paying for staff to do temperature checks at check-in, but it also does include looking at recruitment and retention expenses when it comes to staffing. We know that it's difficult to find qualified staff, and even more so right now. So if your program's looking to do something around that, that would be an allowable expense when it comes to staffing. Then there's this new area that we've been talking about around learning loss. And the purpose here is to design and implement developmentally appropriate activities to compensate for children's time spent outside of the stimulating educational environments that you provide in your program as a result of the pandemic. Some examples of the allowable expenses here include new or expanded curriculum. It includes individual learning supplies for children and families. It does include the possibility for training for your staff and family engagement opportunities all around this learning loss and readiness concept. We purposefully wanted to link together and talk about staffing and learning loss both today because they do go hand in hand. And I've got a couple of guests that are going to help me explain just a little bit more what that means for them to go hand in hand. So I'm very, very excited to be joined today by Erin Kissling, the Vice President of Early Learning Practice and Policy at Early Learning Indiana, and Christine Garzabell, the Vice President of Early Learning Administration at Early Learning Indiana. So these are two of my colleagues, and I will say two of, I think, some of the most caring women in the early childhood field in our state. They are responsible directly for ensuring the high quality care that we have every single day in our day early learning centers. And that is a big responsibility and one that they do not take lightly. So they are here today for some questions that we have, and I've culled some of these questions from applications that we've had come in, emails that have been asked, and people on our office hours in order to ask them to help us understand better what could be done right now and how programs can address the needs that are rising with staffing and learning loss when it comes to the pandemic. So Erin and Christine, welcome. I'm going to flip our screen over to a picture of our kids because that's always nicer to look at when we're talking, and because there's a couple things on this screen of pictures that we may look at and talk about as we go through. So I'm going to throw out a couple of questions for you guys to answer, and then we'll see towards the end if we have any other questions from our participants. But I'd really love to start with the biggest question that we've got, which is, why is learning loss a concern for childcare providers, especially right now?
Sure. So I'm happy to take that one, Natalie, and kick off the conversation. And I'm sure Christine has a lot of perspective on this as well. You know, I think when we think about our work every day, we're not talking a lot about those exact words, learning loss, but we are talking about the fact that we often don't get to see our students as often as we have in the past. And we know that, you know, the same thing that happens in my house right now is that sometimes I have to work and I have a house full of children that need my attention. And so, you know, the focus that they get when they're here at home with me is not the same as that would be when they were in the classroom. And so, you know, we've really been talking about how do we maximize our time that we have with the children in the classroom to ensure that they are ready for kindergarten when it comes time for them to enter into the next stage of their educational career. And so, while it might seem for some of you that, you know, that are really focused around the caring side of this work, you know, a little bit of, you know, a disconnection between what's happening learning wise, but even if you're focused in that space and you think about where the children are with their social emotional development and being able to interact with the peers in their classroom might be something that they're missing while they're at home and don't have as many opportunities to interact with their peers. And so all of those things are what we know help them get to kindergarten readiness. And so it's part of why the exciting part about this fund and the opportunity to be able to focus on those sorts of initiatives.
I love what you said right there, Erin, especially the part about bringing it home to the fact that, you know, we've been in that situation, many of us, where our children are home. You know, I have 3 children, all in different grades, 2 different schools. And when we, you know, last spring, were trying to do at-home learning, I will 100% guarantee they did not get the attention nor the educational quality from me that they would have gotten from their school. And not through any ill intention, but just through the circumstances that we are facing as a community. So very much understanding and respecting the family framework, but also what are the gaps that we can address right now and how do we best address them? Wonderful. Well, thinking on that question then, how can we do that? How can our early childhood education educators within our programs at Day Early Learning, but also across the state, understand where their students may have those gaps in learning right now?
Sure. So one of the things we've done in our programs over the course of the last year is really start to focus on how we understand what our children know. So what assessments are we implementing? How are we collecting that information when we have those opportunities so that it's not just a guess? We actually have understanding of where are they in their fine motor development? What sort of you know, what numbers and letters do they recognize? All of those things that we know we focus on for the time whenever they leave us at the end of their, you know, their 4-year-old year. So we've really beefed up what our staff's ability to understand the assessments that we're implementing and then to really go and deploy them. And so, and now we've had the awesome opportunity to sort of turn the page and start talking about the data that we've been collecting and how we will adjust our instructional practices, how we will change our classroom environments to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all of the children that we're serving every day.
I think that's a crucial point that you bring up. We've seen already in many of our applications for round 2 for the Comeback Stronger Fund that programs are saying they want to address learning loss, but they're not sure what to do. And I think you're speaking to it really well. If you don't have the assessments, if you don't look at the data, you might not know what to do. So having the ability to say, let's do this in a way that is scientifically sound, it's not guesswork, there's backing for it, is a really great approach. And I want to put a point out there to all of you who are participants who may be eligible for the Comeback Stronger Fund grant this round 2, using the funding for the curriculum, the assessments, those pieces. If that's the right choice for your program, that is something that's allowable with your Comeback Stronger Fund grants. So if you are at a point that Erin's talking about, we were in our daily learning classrooms where you can make those decisions based off of the assessments and do supplemental changes, do that piece. That is something that you can do. And Erin, I also like that you started with fine motor skills just because of that picture there in the middle where that child is so into, I'm guessing maybe that shaving cream and paint is my guess on that tray. But, we do have those opportunities right now because we have smaller ratios or different ratios or staffing changes that we are able to give that focus really intentionally on seeing where some of those gaps are and to provide the instruction and learning opportunities around it. So something that you said in there that I want to draw out because I have questions about it, and I think a lot of families might, or some of our programs, if we have programs that are working with their educators to assess students, what are some of the steps or tips that you can give them to ensure that their teaching teams understand how to assess students? How do we ensure that our teaching teams at Daily Learning understand how to assess students when it comes to learning?
Sure. So we have really implemented a robust training plan so that team members have connectivity to our goals and connectivity to their role in making it happen. And so we started with the actual tool itself and orienting ourselves to how to use the tool. And then we have monthly conversations around how it's going, and then what are we doing with what we know? And so it really is ongoing in the sense that, especially over this past year, things have changed at such a regular pace that we have had to adjust. And it's part of who we are as educators to be flexible. But we've had to make those adjustments so that teachers can really ensure they're collecting information in a timely manner when they're able to engage with the children, because they're not always all there on the same schedule. And then that we're then able to gather enough information that we can do something useful and meaningful with it for that child when we have the opportunities to interact with them. And so we've really committed ourselves to a regular schedule of sort of a regular diet of conversation around our assessment tools and around the use of those tools, and then the use of them in our practice with children.
So there's a couple key points there just about one, the intentionality. It has to be something that you're choosing to intentionally do because otherwise it just doesn't happen. Um, and I know a lot of people look at the magic of what happens in early childhood classrooms, but we all know as providers, there's so much intentionality and so many hours and work that goes into it. Would love to let everybody know too, what Erin's talking about there with that staffing time committed to it and the trainings, those are all components that are allowable expenses with your Come Back Stronger Fund grants. So if that's something that you're looking at addressing and your program's in the right place to address that in the next few months, that would be something that you could plan into to use your funds to support. Um, Erin, I think you hit on this a little bit, but I want to get on it just a little bit more explicitly about why now is actually the right time to focus on an organizational approach to child assessment. We've got, you said, everything keeps changing on us. We've got new thoughts every week, and there's this other safety protocol and this additional piece. And now there's 3 kids who are out of the classroom and now they're back in the classroom. There's a lot of change that's happening. Why is it important to focus now on how we're assessing and what we're doing?
So I think the most fundamental reason is because the children need it. They really need us to understand the context of what's happening in their life for them and their growth and development, and for what's happening around them. And so for us, what we've known is that, we have had, our numbers haven't quite been back up to their full levels yet. And it's given us a little extra space and time. We've been able to manipulate our schedules in a way that we have collaborative groups of teachers that can come together and meet with each other. And it's really laying a foundation for how we do our work differently. In that sense, how do we emerge from this post-pandemic stage and get it, and really in a stronger place than we were with our practice when we began this process, almost a year ago. And so we've been able to take advantage of those adjustments to really ensure that we're staying focused around what the children we care for need. And so I think that it's given us just new insight into what it is that we need to do differently in our classrooms to ensure that we're preparing the children for their next environment.
I love what you said there too, because it is a great point of this is not in and of itself pandemic response. This is in and of itself response to the needs of the child and the children that we care for, which is present when there's emergencies in our community and not. But because the children are part of our community, the ability to take the time that we have now to strengthen our practice and to be very intentional about it, it is a unique opportunity and it is crucially important. We know that there's so many children and families and providers and staff that are dealing with circumstances in their personal lives in different ways than they may have previously. And so to really have these supports right now and that focus on assessment, gap support, understanding, and using the data to show that and adjust is really, I think, a very intentional positive approach to how we can support the children that we need to support. Well, I'm going to throw it over to Christine for this next one because I know that this is happening in our centers, and this is a question that has been alluded to in a couple of applications, and I want to make sure to highlight it. When we talk about staffing for those needs, then, how can programs adjust their staffing to meet the needs of children right now? Before I let you answer, I'm going to point out a couple of the ways that we've already had shared, things like having staffing, that picture that we have at the bottom center where we're handing off the child maybe and, taking temperatures instead of having parents come in the room, or we have additional staff for cleaning. But specifically thinking about supporting these learning outcomes, how can we adjust staffing to meet the needs of our children in our care right now?
As Erin alluded to, we talked about a lot, making sure that we're being very intentional about putting who's in the building at what time. We've noticed that our families are coming in differently. We've noticed the attendance, our children's attendance is different. And so making sure that we have our most qualified staff and the staff during the day when the children's experiences are most, and there's the most children there, right? So we don't want the best teachers coming in and opening the building and spending their time cleaning the toys, right? Like we have a couple of different varieties of staff that we can do that. So we can ask staff that are substitutes and our floaters that that are critical to our operation to come in early, stay to do the afternoon cleaning and to help us with the sanitizing, to help us with the running. But when you want to look at your most qualified, your most the teachers that have the most experience utilizing your assessment, utilizing your curriculum, and making sure that they're planning those intentional experiences for their children and that they get to carry them out, right? If they do all the work to plan for them and then they're not actually in the classroom to physically implement them, then we rely on others to do that. And then they don't get they don't have all of that data that Erin was talking about, right? They're not witnessing whether or not this experience where, do the children actually, that scaffolding of learning, did they actually use those, materials? Do they need more instruction in that area? So I think it's really critical to think about the time of day that you're staffing when you're bringing your teachers in and different people that are in the different adults and the different roles that everybody has, and looking at that so that you're really addressing where the students are and making sure that they are with the teachers that have those most that have their best needs during the meatiest part of their day. And it's changed a little bit, right? Like it's not always the early morning. Sometimes I've recently said, our afternoon might have to be more, parents our schedules are coming in later. And so we need to make sure that the robust learning experiences are happening after the nap time, just as robust as they are in the morning time. So we're just really making sure that every moment is being utilized to really provide those robust learning experiences.
I think there's such great intentionality there. And a phrase comes to mind that I've heard before, that not all hours are created equal. I think it's, when I look at all of the things and all of the tasks that need to be done within the centers, they are all crucially important when it comes to safety and development. But there are different skill sets involved. And while I am fairly confident that you guys could show me some of the necessary cleaning within the centers and I could help you and I could do that, if you were to place me in a different role in the centers, you would not get what you get out of your teachers because they have that experience and they have those relationships built. And so the ability to do both pieces you said there, to be able to look at the data, but then to be able to make the plans and implement them, that's where we're going to be able to get these robust learning experiences. And you only get that with making sure that you're matching the time for those opportunities to occur. So that's something that's been mentioned by a few people, or at least alluded to by a few people as they've applied for the second round of Comeback Stronger funds. And I want to make sure all participants know that is something that you could explain that you're doing, is adjusting your staff time so that way your qualified teachers are spending those moments directly with the students in order to ensure that you have somebody who's coming in for temporary hours within the morning to help people get settled into the rooms and be ready for their learning experiences with those teachers. Christine, another one of the things that we're having people ask are what are some of the ways that programs and families can work together to support students when they are away from the classroom? We know there may be students who have to quarantine at some points this year, or teachers or family members and all of that. What are some of the approaches we can take to ensuring that there's alignment between that crazy schedule in support of the child?
I've heard from not only in our adult centers, but across our community of the different ways that so many of our early childhood teachers have really just stepped up, been creative and innovative in those ways. But it's really being able to open those lines of communication with families and making sure that we're giving families I would say the activities and is giving them the information. So we have some examples of some buckets that were like pre-made. So that in the event that a center had to close a classroom, these are materials that were sent home with families. So, and they're simple, there's blocks, there's some books, but really we all have always talked about building habits with families starts early and talking about reading, right? Building readers starts at the beginning age in our infant classrooms, helping families know how important that is, just exposing your children to books, to reading, to exposing them to the materials, whether it's the stacking cups or the commercial materials that we might have in these boxes, or sharing with families that, especially right around now, or, a lot more people are getting deliveries. It's just boxes, or it's the pots and pans and the stacking, using the measuring cups, things that are at home, and really helping families understand how just providing those materials for children to explore, to just, to utilize those in building the vocabulary, talking to the children and really talking to them about what they're exploring, adding those key words of, measurements, cups versus, a half a cup versus, I know we talked a little bit about cooking. So as you're doing that, you're building the math skills, and we could just really help families understand all of the things that we do in our classrooms that come naturally to us, that we can just really help families to be aware as they are spending time more at home. What are the ways that they can ask those open-ended questions and really spark curiosity with even the things that they have in their own home, to just let children have that opportunity to explore.
I had not made the connection between what possibly might be my more than necessary pandemic time purchases and the ability to have boxes for my children to use. But that is going to be my reason now, is that I'm clearly providing additional open-ended learning materials for my household as it comes to that. But it is something, I mean, we're ordering a lot of products in our centers and in our homes. Boxes are a never-ending source of joy for children because they can be anything. The wonderful world of boxes. But I like what you said there too, that makes that connection. There are the examples on the right hand side of our screen there of some of the tubs, learning tubs that we send home. But there's an intentionality with the objects that were chosen, but also the connections that are made then on how to use them in a way that really reaffirms both parents as being teachers within their children's life, but how can we do some of the same things in the same way? Talk about measurements in our classroom and talk about measurements at home, and use some of that the common language in the words, because it does create some of that alignment between what's happening in the classroom and what's happening at home when schedules do go awry. I'm not going to say if schedules do go awry, because as evidenced in, I think every provider participant would agree, schedules have gone awry over the past few months and may continue to. Well, I've got one more question for you, Christine, and then I'm going to just round it out with anything else you guys want to add or share. But Christine, specifically, we've received ideas from programs that are looking for partners or additional curriculum or pieces that they can use to supplement some of the learning happening right now and the line between the program and the home. And talking about things like you said, the cooking curriculum or partnering with STEM organizations to add enrichment to their program. What types of partnerships and activities would you suggest for programs that want to add those hands-on learning pieces that serve both the families and the teachers to help support the children?
So one resource that I would share that we've utilized and is to think about your Purdue Extension program in your area. Like they do a lot with like the cooking, the healthy eating. So you're really building up, healthy eating, healthy diets. They do a lot of examples. A lot of the things that we've done with our families, we've done a Cooking Matters, and we've been able to do that via Zoom. So again, not only are you helping with nutrition and things like that, but you're adding vocabulary, you're adding the math experiences, things like that. You're getting like those. I know there's different, and you have to be creative of who's in your community, what's going on. Miracle-Gro had done some stuff with gardening, and so, I mean, we're in Indiana, so it's not the most ideal time to try to start a garden, but come springtime when it's a little bit more, things are a little softer out there, but really just keeping your eyes and ears open and thinking about who's in your local community, what resources. I know as an early child care provider, we are always, meeting the local whomever, right, businesses to help support things like that. So figuring out what ways you can do that. We've had experiences. Arts for Learning has done virtual artists have done their programming virtual. We've got a Reading Buddies program, so we're working on trying to get volunteers with our community to really engage and provide some reading. So thinking about those different ways that we can add and keep our community involved in not only our program, and just giving children different experiences. So that, I think, that builds a wealth of not only resources for families, but for our educators and for our children, as we all kind of are a little bit more sheltered in, but that there's still a world out there that they need to learn about, and we're gonna all be back into it one day.
We will be gardening again, and we will be visiting. We will have all of those components, and it is important to keep that in mind, is that this is the reality for our children now, but it's also the reality of how we support them into their next year. And the following pieces, I love that you hit on one, using technology there, and what technology do you have available, and how do we communicate across, because it is something that's necessary, and what you have, use, and help reinforce that. But also the fact that there are many partners when you start to look around in your community that want to be involved in this work and have the expertise to be involved in this work, whether that be through Purdue Extension or another community group. And the ability to bring them in and partner with them is something that we would highly support with the Come Back Stronger Fund grants, and then just in general. So if there is an element of, we've wanted to do a gardening curriculum, or we've wanted to do a cooking curriculum, and it's been on our to-do list, but we've just not gotten to it, now would be a great time to use some of the funds from your Come Back Stronger Fund grant to support the implementation of that program, especially if it's something that you can then keep that partnership going for multiple years and be able to support. So I did say I would throw one more question at you, and I'm just going to make it super open-ended, but just to say, do you have any other suggestions, advice, or anything you would want to share with any of the providers who are participating today around ensuring that their programs are using all of the possibilities they have and all of the resources they have right now to support readiness and growth within their students?
I would just encourage you to really think about your team members, because we know that's who makes the biggest impact in the classroom, is the adults who work directly with children. And so thinking about how you support them to do their very best work is what gets us to what we need for kids to be ready for their next environment. And so thanks for the work that you do, because it makes a foundation for children that changes their trajectory and really sets us all up for success in the future, as what you do lays the foundation for their success.
I would agree. I would just say that just continue to support your teachers, be thoughtful about how you're offering that support, and then supporting the families, and just having those two-way lines of communication, so you understand where the families are coming from, and to understand what barriers there may be, and how teachers and families often really have those dialogues. And so with us not having those direct one-on-one conversations, what are the ways that you're reaching out to families so that they know that you're there, and just making sure to keep those lines open. You are resources for families, and they trust you with their most precious cargo every day. And so keep doing all the great work that you're doing, and just keep those lines of communication open. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, Erin and Christine, thank you so much for joining us. If you can stick around for a few minutes, I'm going to give a couple more pieces about our grant, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. I have the feeling a lot of the questions may deal specifically with the Come Back Stronger Fund grants and the round that we're looking at right now, but there may also be some really tailored to ideas around what you guys were able to share. So if you're able to stick around, you can jump off camera if you want to while we go through these next couple things, and then you can come back on if you'd like to when it's question time.
Natalie, it looks like you may have lost sound. Ryan, are you
No,
getting sound?
I'm just muted. It's okay. I told you it's the technology day. It's my Monday, Tuesday. And what I said was totally brilliant, everyone. No, I was just, thank you, Carrie. Just reminding everyone about some of the key dates that we have upcoming. We have already opened up the application for previous grantees. So that is open right now. If you did receive a round one grant from the Come Back Stronger Fund, you are eligible to apply for additional funding right now. And we are meeting today to talk a little bit more in depth about staffing and learning loss and discover possibilities and suggestions you could use if you're wanting to use your grant for those areas. Very important next date is going to be February 12th. If you are one of those previous grantees who received a Come Back Stronger Fund grant in round one, you have until February 12th to apply for additional funding. And then immediately afterwards, the next Monday on February 15th, our application will open for new grantees. So those are for grantees who did not receive an award in our first round of funding. So either because you were not eligible at the time or because you did not apply, that's your opportunity to ensure that you are able to be considered for funding. And for all of those who do receive funding for round two, we will be extending your timeline to expend your funds to October 31st. So that way too, we're taking into account anything that could happen in the next few months, but also really ensuring that you're able to get new students in the fall and get your classes very well organized prior to funds needing to be expended, excuse me. And just so that everybody remembers, we do have multiple opportunities for support. So for one, there's myself and Ryan from our grant management team who are on our office hours every Friday from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern. You can join those office hours directly from the web page. There's a click button. You can just click and join the office hours right then and join us on Zoom, and we're able to answer questions, give suggestions, anything that you might need to know about your application or the fund. Join us. You can join for 5 minutes and then jump off, really just to get your questions asked and ensure that you're able to receive the answers you need to in order for us to progress you through the process. If you do have a very specific situation or you need more information, you can also email us for additional technical assistance or support, and that is stronger@earlylearningindiana.org. And we do have that assistance provided in both English and Spanish. So if you do need that in Spanish, please, when you email us, just request it in Spanish and we're able to get back to you that way. So now I'm going to leave myself unmuted and ask Ryan if he would want to join us to be able to ask any of the questions that we've had coming in, and we'll see if we're able to answer any of our requests.
Yes, give me 1 second here. Okay, while I'm working on getting my camera up, I will still go ahead and start. So the first question that we have that came in is, would requesting iPads or tablets in multiples, one per kindergartner level child for kindergarten ready kids, be accepted as a way to personalize and not to share with others? So from reading this, it does sound like they would be for kindergartners, is what they're asking.
Okay. So there's a couple of components there. Technology is allowable under the umbrella of allowable expenses for the Come Back Stronger Fund. However, everything purchased underneath the Come Back Stronger Fund grants must be directed towards use for ages 0 to 5, not in kindergarten. So we're looking for those students who are enrolled in your early learning program, not necessarily an after school or a before and after school program. So if you do have 5-year-olds that are in a pre-kindergarten class or that are in a 3 to 5-year-old class, something like that, so not ones that go to a K-12 school and then return, but those who are in your care for the early learning curriculum and the early learning opportunities, those would be allowable. When we look and consider things like technology, we're really looking at the intent for them. We know that right now there is the need for teachers to communicate with families in different ways than they used to. And if that is through using technology versus having the handwritten notes they may have or the face-to-face conversations, that is allowable. It is also allowable if you have an aspect of what you are doing with your early learners that does require technology and we're trying to minimize sharing. So what it really comes down to is, as the provider, you need to be able to clearly explain the function and the intention behind the purchase of the technology in order for Early Learning Indiana to understand and to acknowledge that it meets the intent of the fund.
We opened up a new classroom to comply with social distancing. Are the salaries for the teachers and assistants that we hired for this new classroom eligible for the staffing expense within this grant?
Okay, well, first, I'm very excited that you were able to open up a new classroom. It's definitely in need right now. What I would look at there is whether or not the new staffing is directly a result of pandemic level or pandemic response staffing. So for instance, if you typically on a year and a half ago, if you were going to be in that classroom and you typically had 3 adults in that classroom, and you now still have 3 adults present, and the way that you have it set up, that would be considered kind of your typical budget. We wouldn't look for the funds from the Come Back Stronger grant to pay for those hours. However, if because you're now in 2 rooms and you have to have a 4th staff member, and it's the direct result of having to do that additional social distancing, the hours from that 4th staff member would be considered a change in your staffing plan based off of a pandemic response. So you could claim the hours for that 4th person because you would not have had those hours in your budget unless you were doing the COVID response. So I will say anytime there's any questions specific around staffing or hours, you can always email us with them. But the biggest question we're going to come back with is, what were they doing and why was it required because of COVID? And that way you're able to answer both of those questions very satisfactorily. And again, it has to relate to the ages 0 to 5 in your early learning program. We're typically able to make accommodations for most staffing needs that you may have.
And real quick before I get to the next question, can you go back to the one slide that just kind of shows the office hours, our email address, all that additional information? Yes, I think that was just it that you have. Someone that just asked to see that. Perfect. Okay. And then would purchasing a larger circle time rug to spread out children be appropriate for a request?
That is an easy yes. I'm a big fan of visual markers and visual reminders for children, especially within the environment. So something like that to help with social distancing. I cannot judge distance from me to other people. And if we did not have the wonderful circle markers when I was out in public, I would not be 6 feet away from people. So if you need something that's going to be a visual reminder for children of where they need to sit, where they need to be, that would all be allowable underneath the environments component.
And then I believe when we had Kristen on or Christina on, someone's just asking on how they sent supplies home, and they're asking if they actually let the children mention the blocks and things to use at home. Do the kids actually keep those at home, or then do they bring them back the next day, or how does that work? Someone's asking.
So I am 99% certain, but if I'm wrong, Christine can correct me, that they got to keep those.
We did. We used some specific funding related to that, and we purchased materials. We made certain boxes for children to have at home so that they were able to do that in the case that we had to close classrooms. We've had instances where we've had to close a quarantine a whole classroom for 2 weeks, and so that while they were at home, they still had materials and supplies. We typically sent in those boxes were sheets of activities so that it would explain to the parents, what the scarves were like. Just have fun and put on some music and dance and, or peekaboo and object permanence. And so we just kind of explained what those materials would be. They were all very open-ended materials most families could just use, and that they didn't need specific instructions, but it just gave parents of how that, stacking cups is building math skills and things like that. So we just shared with families a little bit about what those materials were, but they were then allowed to, once we only gave them to the classrooms that that we had to close for extended periods of time. Once we handed them out, we did not give them back.
Thank you.
And I have to think that's a great strategy with family engagement anyway, because if they did have to miss time, they have them. But even if they didn't, those are still wonderful materials for them to have at home to help with the learning.
And then did you share the award amounts on a slide, Natalie?
I did. I can go back to that as
Yes.
well.
We have a couple questions. I think people just want to see it. So if you could share, we've been on the, okay. And then while you're pulling that up, we have an individual or a provider where they currently are asking, they currently do not offer childcare during the school year because they're pre-K. If they could run over the summer, so they're thinking about running over the summer, if they could apply for funds to support a 4-week summer program with implementing a program to hit a certain learning loss that we have found through the current assessments.
So there's a few components there. One, it would have to be, they'd have to have eligibility and meet all the eligibility criteria, either as a previous grantee or as a potential new grantee. But assuming they met all the criteria, that would be something that's come up frequently in conversations, especially as we look at this readiness, is knowing that there's students who had interrupted attendance and interrupted time in learning opportunities this past year. Could we do something that's kind of, a readiness push or a readiness camp? An additional opportunity over the summer to help them be in engaging environments, especially knowing that circumstances in a few months may be very different than what circumstances are right now in terms of what we're able to do. That would be considered an allowable expense, all of the components of it as it had to do with the preparation time, the materials, the training, all of those elements underneath the learning loss category of the allowable expenses.
And then our award amounts for a current number enrolled or the capacity that we're licensed for?
So enrollment, or the award amounts, are based off of your enrollment as of the week of January 4th. So coming into kind of this semester or past few weeks, what your enrollment is, it is not off of license capacity for this specific award.
And I do want to mention it's that whole week. So if you have kids that just come on Tuesday and Thursday, you can still include them. It's not just on the 4th. So it's that entire week.
Yes. There also may be some people like me that Monday, January 4th, were maybe not as functional in getting everything together as they were on Tuesday, January 5th.
Another requesting for, can funding be requested for absent families not able to pay their tuition due to multiple quarantines within their family? So they're obviously not able to send their child to, for childcare. However, they're still being charged, it sounds like. So
Funds are not able to be used for tuition supports. So what you would need to do is look at, are there other eligible expenses that you could use funds towards? So you could use funds towards some of those learning hubs or pieces like that to help supplement learning at home. You could use funds towards some of the staffing components if you need additional staffing, if you've had to move children around because of that. But specifically for tuition supports, if children are not attending, that is not something that would be allowable under this fund.
okay. And what about raises for teachers that have been here through the stressful time and teaching the children to be calm and to continue to learn every day?
Mm-hmm. So underneath the staffing piece, and there is something on our webpage that I would highly suggest everybody check out. It is our allowable expenses document. So if you're on the webpage and you're looking for each of the drop downs where there's each of the categories of expenses, all 6 of them, and you can do a drop down and you can take a look at a little bit more at what there is. There's a document linked right there under allowable expenses that details out what you can do in each of the categories, and also says if there's something that's not on there, you need to email us at stronger@earlylearningindiana.org before planning to spend your funds towards that, just in case it is not allowable. Very specifically under staffing, it does note that stipends or raises are not considered allowable under this. So what I would ask is, if your intention there is to help support the staff who are doing this, you might look at, are there additional pieces that you could do as it relates to supporting their mental health? Are there additional retention or recruitment opportunities that you could do that are a part of your program that you could put into place? So is there a way to meet that need underneath allowable expenses, because you cannot use the funds in order to supplement either stipends or raises for staff?
Okay. And with just 2 minutes left, I do know there's a handful of questions that we were unable to get to. So please, if we have any unanswered questions, do email stronger@earlylearningindiana.org. I am going to turn it back over to Natalie for closing remarks.
Okay, and I will go back just to pull up so that you can see the upcoming opportunities again, because I do think that's the important part for us to leave out of here with. We will have our office hours this Friday, so please, we would welcome anybody to come and join us with your questions this Friday from 12 to 2. As I said earlier, we are going to begin notifying providers who have applied for round 2 funding this week. So if you are a provider who was awarded previously a round 1 grant from the Come Back Stronger Fund, get your application in. If you have specific questions, email them, attend the office hours, but get moving on getting your application submitted so that you can be considered for funding, additional funding in this round 2. And then we're really looking forward to opening up and extending the round to be able to engage those providers who are not funded in round 1 to ensure that every eligible program across the state has an opportunity to apply for funds. So hopefully we see some of you guys on our office hours this Friday. I'm really hoping that Ryan and I see some of your applications coming in, and email us with those questions and those individual circumstances. We want to be able to continue to support the high quality, dedicated providers like you that are ensuring that every Hoosier child right now and their families are being cared for in an environment that is stimulating, that is developmentally appropriate, and that our children are able to be with the teams and the staff members who are truly committed to ensuring that they are ready for kindergarten and beyond. So I'm going to wrap this up by saying thank you for the work that you are doing for Hoosier families. And if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of us. Thanks.